Welcome to the Geek podcast, where this week we're committing. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I do.
Okay, great. Today we're talking about staying with a game longer term, which is something that I don't do a whole lot. Sometimes you do too, but you tend to kind of bounce like I do, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Austin and I were talking about it probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, how I don't finish games, that I start and I really get into them, and then something happens where I end up putting it down for a little bit or seeing something else new that's shiny and not going back to it to finish it, despite it being a really good game and me really enjoying the entire process. So for, like we were talking about last episode, for Fire Emblem Three Houses, to make me finish it and immediately start again, there was something there that was abnormal for me that drew me in.
Yeah, it's super
out
interesting.
Of the ordinary, I guess.
No, totally. And I get it because, like, I mean, you know me, I sample a ton of games. Like, I don't really dive in, and then if I'm into one, because if you get into one, you have a tendency to break out of it and then never go back, which happens a lot. And for me, if I get into one, I will usually like play through it or finish it, once I'm actually in the game. But I do a lot of sampling up front where like I'll try things for, it's usually like less than half an hour. I don't need a whole lot of time to assess a game. And if it doesn't click with me early, I have no problem just being like, okay, I see what the game has to offer. I've kind of like mentally contextualized it. And now I'm going to move on to the next game because there's always more out there.
And that's kind of how I do Steam. I know we've talked about it in the past, that I'll use PC as kind of a demo service on Steam, that when there's something I'm curious about but not sure if I'll want to play it, even for my amount of playing, I'll use a Steam return to be able to make sure that that it is either something I want to stick with or not.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this topic really, it comes from a question that Rob from The Comic Box, and sometimes Rob on the network, posed to us. So he was kind of directing it at me because I've been playing so much of, like, Magic the Gathering Arena this year, and I'm playing it consistently. And I don't know if I would say I'm committed to it, but I'm definitely, like, playing that game way longer than I've played. I don't even know the last time that I was hooked on something for this long. I mean, Dragalia Lost, kind of, but that's a mobile game. I play that, like, 20 minutes on my phone a day. I'm not, like, really hardcore playing that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I opened my mouth to say Dragalia Lost and Fire Emblem Heroes, but at the same time, you're right. That's not something where you necessarily buy the season pass for or sit at home at night and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to spend my downtime.
Exactly. Yeah, the last time that I did something for like this long in a game like this that, was higher stakes than a mobile game was probably Overwatch for months and months right after it came out. So it's been a while, honestly.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, even MMOs like Final Fantasy 14, it's just story and then move on.
Yeah, essentially. So what Rob said was considering that I didn't expect to get into Magic, but I seem to be falling headfirst into it now, what would it take for me to bounce off of it and to give up on it? And then he said, is it like just time that happens, or are there other factors at play that make you walk away from something that you've previously really enjoyed? And I just thought this was like an interesting question, so I want to open it up to be a full topic for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've not really thought about before this. Before he asked that, it was something that was just kind of this ephemeral, kind of ineffable quality that you can't quantify about video games. Like, well, there's something there, or it's not. And I guess this is time for us to think about it.
Yeah, and this kind of puts me back into the conversations we've had in the past about evergreen games, because we've had that topic come up time and time again, because I just think it's a fascinating topic. There are so many people out there that they just have their one game or their one game series, right? So like I know people that their game is Destiny 2, that's all they play. Or it's, they did Destiny and then they moved to Destiny 2. I also know people that they get Madden every year, or they get I'm not going to remember any of the other sports games off the top of my head because I don't play them. There you go, FIFA. Yeah, they get FIFA every year. And it's their series, right? So it's not one game, but it's essentially the same thing. They're committed to like one game series. And I've never really been that person.
Well, you do that with Assassin's Creed. That you grab all of the Assassin's Creed games, even if you don't know if they're going to be good, or even if you don't think they're going to be good, that you do that you play every every single iteration of it, even the remakes.
So there are series that I definitely feel like that about, like Final Fantasy. The next Final Fantasy 16, whenever it comes out, it doesn't matter what it is. You already have my $60.
Right.
But I'm thinking more along the lines of like, I'm not the kind of person that I only play that one game. Whereas what I'm talking about
I see
are
what
like,
you're saying.
yeah, the people who like, I am a FIFA game player. I'm not like, I don't do other video games. I don't really branch out. I just play FIFA all the time. And there's no problem with that. It's just not how I approach gaming.
Yeah, and I was almost like that through college with World of Warcraft. Like, well, I guess I should say MMOs in general, because there was always one MMO that I played at the exclusion of almost everything else. Like, pretty much, like, if it wasn't a multiplayer game that I would play with my friends, or like a once in a blue moon RPG like Kingdom Hearts coming out, I probably wasn't going to play it if it wasn't Ultima Online, Star Wars Galaxies, or World of Warcraft. And when it was World of Warcraft, like, that was exclusively my game for a long time. I did not buy a PlayStation 3 when it came out because of not caring, because I was playing World of Warcraft. So I understand that mentality. It's just like, I don't have time for anything else because I just love this so much.
Yeah, and like I've been there a couple times, right? I've been there enough to like understand it, but also I just like variety. I like new games too much. Like, I bounce between games so much. And I really enjoy the fact that like I can sample something and get everything I'm going to get out of it in half an hour, because it means I get to experience a lot of games, even if I don't like commit to all of them and play deeply into them. So Magic the Gathering Arena is definitely an exception, because like when it first came, or when I first was getting into it, which it's still in beta, like it's not even fully released yet, but earlier this year, as I was getting hooked on it, that was the only game I was playing for, probably a couple weeks, maybe even close to a month. Like, I was playing it a lot. And now that it's been more time, I've kind of fallen into this pattern where I will play it every couple days. I'm still playing it very consistently. I'm still trying to clear out all my daily quests, but not every day, but like you can build them up over 3 days, and then I'll go in every third day and like knock them all out. So that's kind of how I'm playing these days. But then after I knock out my daily quests, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I'm done. And then other times it's like, well, let me play around with this deck, or let me try this special event they're running, or maybe I'll do a sealed event. Maybe I'll do that's when I know that a game has its hooks in me. If I'm only doing the daily stuff and then I'm always bouncing off of it, that game doesn't really have a strong draw for me, which is honestly, that's what Dragalia Lost is right now. Like,
right, you go through the content that is there, but you don't want to experience anything else and try to experiment with the systems and really try to break it or get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Magic, it's like some days it's that because I'm tired, or I have other things going on, or I have a different game I want to play. And like I said, it's every like third day, approximately every 2 or 3, something like that. And there are other times where I'm just like, oh, that was fun. Let me do some more. Let me try a new deck. Let me try a different approach. Let me try something else. So that's when I know that it's like, okay, this game still is like going on in the back of my head when I'm not playing it, in a really good way, because I'm engaging with it more than I would other games.
Right. And that's something that a lot of games just don't have for me. That one of the reasons I can't get into a lot of games other than RPGs is because I don't engage with them. That I end up getting really bored because of the mechanics. And it's not that they're bad games. Like, that's the thing. I recognize that they are quality, good games. But whenever they are repetitive or kind of, I don't even want to say mindless action, but stuff like Devil May Cry that is pretty action, but it doesn't have a whole lot of nuance to it. Like, I would love to play that game when it gets on Steam sale pretty soon, but it's not something I'm going to dig into hardcore because it doesn't have that granular, systemic everything and a storyline. And I don't know, it's just, there's something about games that grab me where everything is like this perfect whole.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Like, I get when there's like a perfect balance that works for you. And it really does. It takes a lot for a game to become an evergreen game for me. And it's like there's this huge hurdle to overcome, and then if a game can overcome that, then it's really the tail end that either proves itself out or doesn't, right?
Yeah.
It's like, is there enough there for me to mentally engage with on an ongoing basis that I can keep coming back and be challenged and see new things, and whether it's new content or new approaches or new game types or new something, right? And if something can pass both of those tests and become an evergreen game for me, it is really, really hard to dislodge it from being an evergreen game. And, just like a long-term game that I'm going to keep coming back to over and over. And it happens. It happens eventually, and sometimes it's just because the game gets stale because I played it for years, right?
Right.
Or it's so far in the past, and that'll happen to any game over time. But I don't know. It's interesting to me that like it takes so much to get there, but if a game can get there, then I stick with it for a super long time.
And thinking about that, were you saying that what makes them stop being evergreen games? Like having committed to them, they've done basically everything right. If they've become an evergreen game that I'm going back to, or like you're going back to, and it is consistently keeping our attention and making us feel that kind of excitement that we had, even though we know exactly the kind of gameplay loop that we're going to have. But bouncing off of them, like making like them falling off the list, falling out of rotation, I can only think of a couple that have really ever done that, and one of them was Hearthstone. Kind of that game. Like I reinstalled it yesterday on my phone, downloaded it, logged in and looked, and I was like, I'm done. It's like I don't care. I just don't care about playing this, that I've experienced as much of this as I really want to play. If I have a friend online, I might play the game with them. But I looked at it, I was like, I don't want to do any of this, just random card playing. I'll do that in Magic the Gathering Arena. I'll play Arena and it'll be great.
Well, and some of it depends on like how hard they make it to get back into a game after you're out of it. Because there are things that game developers can do that make that... So let me put it this way. When you're first getting into a game, almost every game out there that's well designed has a very good on-ramp for getting into the game for the very first time. Yes. And the thing that is rare out there is to have an on-ramp for returning players. And I think if you can do that, you can get so many more players that return over time. But it doesn't ever seem to be a priority with game developers.
No, because you're wanting to attract the new people who are going to spend the money out of that sense of excitement and newness and building up that initial whatever it is that you have to build up in the game, especially if it's an episodic kind of game that's like Overwatch or Magic. I don't even want to say episodic's not the right term. That's a television term. The individual matches and things like that, where like World of Warcraft bounced off of my list. Like it just fell off, and it actually only really fell off at Battle for Azeroth last year. I got done with it. I do not care about any of the other content that came out. It's a great game. It's wonderful. I only did half the story. I never even started the Alliance story. All of the content patches, I usually go back through and see, all the content. Don't care at all. And I know that it happened because WoW Classic came out this week, and I feel zero pull to play it despite everybody else like going crazy, having such a good time on it. It does not have an appeal for me at all, and so I can really say that I know this one fell off despite me not even having realized that it had just been like, okay, I had my 15 years with you, and now I'm ready to move on. You don't have that perfect storm of fun for me anymore, and it's not even that it was the end game gear grind. It wasn't that the storytelling in Final Fantasy XIV was better. It was just like, okay, I've experienced all of this now because it has been so similar for so long. That's like, okay, I'm good. I don't hate it. I just don't care. It's not even that I don't care. Like that's not even the way to put it. It's that I'm finished. I beat it. That's kind of the way I feel. I see on your notes down here a little bit below, like if you feel like you've beaten something, and that's kind of how I feel about World of Warcraft. Like,
right.
I've seen all the stuff that I need to see in this game. I've seen the credits, and I'm good now.
And there's something to be said for like, I don't buy games very often that don't have an ending. I really try to be protective of my time and not like overcommit to a game that doesn't have a hard end, because I like finishing games and moving on to the next one. And something like World of Warcraft, any MMO out there, something like Magic the Gathering Arena or Hearthstone, like we've mentioned, none of those games have an end, not a true end. So sometimes it comes down to, and this is kind of us getting into, like you just said, like what makes us stop, right? Why do we end these games after we've committed to them? And it's when I feel like I've beaten something, even if there's no true end to it, because in MMO, there's no ending. Like, it's a world. It just exists. It keeps running whether you're there or not. But I feel like you get to the point, and this is basically what you were saying, that you feel like you've seen everything you're going to see, and any other time that you spend in there would just be rehashing stuff that you've already experienced. Like when I get to that point, I know I've beaten a game. And like internally, that's how I feel. Like I check it off my mental list. I'm like, yes, Final Fantasy 14, Shadowbringers, I've beaten that. I beat it. Even though they keep adding new content, the world's still living. I know people are still playing it, but I beat it. So I've put it down for a while, and I'll come back, I don't know, 6 months, a year, maybe right before the next expansion. But like I'm done for now.
There's something about when you start these games that grabs you, and it's the returning that tends to make it like stick like that. Like with Final Fantasy, I always have a good time when I go back and I start interacting with the story and I start interacting with the other players. That's not what keeps me there, though. I end up going away once I've finished a hard point in the story, like a finite ending there. But with games like Overwatch, I go back to that game and I feel like the first time I'm logging in, like, oh, this is really good. Like this is a fantastic version of this kind of game, and so I want to play that, and I want to play the new characters, and the content that they keep adding is new and different enough that it changes how the game plays, where when you get a new tank that is the new flavor of the month, or a new healer, it changes the mechanics of the game that may have been burned out before, where I haven't finished a story, I haven't done something like that, where I'll go back to see those new characters and how they changed it. But with an MMO, it's generally the gameplay hasn't changed that much. With something like an MMO or a card game, it takes a lot for a card game to completely change its spots, which is a really weird metaphor in the way for me to say it.
Well, and with MMOs too, there's also the gear treadmill at the end. And like that's one of those typical things I think of where it's like, oh yeah, you're enjoying a game, but then you hit this end game point where they just want to keep you as long as they can, but it's not a compelling reason to keep you. It's just there to keep you on this treadmill so that you stay like semi-engaged or actively engaged so that they can keep getting money out of you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That happens with all MMOs, and I've talked about it before, that like that's something that will make me, because there are times in the past where I like committed to an MMO and I played for a really long time, and every time I ended up stopping one of those when I was in that headspace was because of the gear treadmill at the end, when I just felt like, oh, there's like, you're progressing but you're not really progressing, and there's no real point because there's no more content, and that kind of thing happens. So what I was trying to think of is like, what's the equivalent of that for games that are more like a mobile game or like Magic the Gathering Arena, because that's kind of, what I was trying to frame a lot of this around, because that's the most relevant right now. And for that, it would be like if when all of these new sets are coming out for Magic the Gathering Arena, if I felt like I needed to keep up with it and like I had to buy the cards no matter what, and that there was nothing new in them, then I would definitely like go away from it. Like that would push me away from the game. So I think one of the interesting things that I noticed is that the latest set, the Core 2020, my playtime like every week in Magic the Gathering Arena went down a lot with that set. After the first week, like in the first week, everything's new no matter what. But because
of course.
Yeah. Because it's a core set, it didn't really introduce new mechanics. It didn't really introduce new characters or anything that's new. I mean, there are new things, but it's not to the extent that the other sets do, where they really push the boundaries on something and they take the game in a new direction. This is more just like reestablishing the base. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not doing what makes us come back to the evergreen games for. Like it's keeping it fresh and keeping it solid, but it's not making it new. Fresh is different than new. And the new mechanics, the block sets are all going to do that for you. What about single player games? What makes you stick with something? Like your Gamefly binges are hilarious to me, because like you've lasted 3 minutes in a game before and you're like, nope, I'm done. This is a hard pass. And I think it's hilarious that you immediately know what is wrong with the game. That, well, I don't even say what's wrong with it. I keep
just
phrasing
like
things
what
weirdly.
I don't like about it, or that I wouldn't engage with, because like I know my own tastes at this point, right? And there's something to be said for, there are games out there that I don't have any idea within the first little bit, right? Sometimes that's the first half hour. Sometimes that's even the first hour, where like I just can't get a read on the game. I don't know what it's offering yet. And that's always a super interesting feeling for me, because it's very rare, because I've played enough games and I've played enough. One of the things at play here is probably that I have sampled so many genres, and I've gotten pretty deep into most video game genres at one point or another over the years, and I don't think that's true for you necessarily.
I've never been as deep as you've gone into them, probably. Like, I can't think of a genre that I've not played and beaten multiple games in.
Okay.
Except maybe something like Madden or FIFA. Like, I've played and beat sports games and gone through the seasons and things like that, but it's not something that I generally care to return to. I think that's where genre comes into play so much for me. It's that I know what these genres represent and what they bring to the table. Like action games, I know that I have to be in a certain mood to play through action games. That I'm actually not going to buy Astral Chain when it comes out here just next week maybe, because I know that I'm not in the mood to play it, and so I will probably bounce and not give it the fair shake that it deserves. So I'm going to wait until later this fall when I have the time to really, I want that as opposed to the kind of slower paced strategy and RPG that I'm actually really truly enjoying right now.
Yeah, there's something to be said for like waiting for the right time, that you're in the mood for a game. Like I do that. I'll put games on my gaming list and I'll just like throw them all the way to bottom if I know that I'm not in any space that I want to like, or headspace, I should say, that I want to engage with that type of game. Because I get into a mode where I'm just like, yeah, I could go for a really good first-person shooter. But right now, I feel almost the opposite. Like, I don't want a first-person shooter. Like, that's just not what I'm interested in right now. And action games are kind of the same way. Like, I like a good action game when I'm in the right mood for it. And I haven't been lately. So, like, yeah, I'm not going to pick up Astral Chain either. But also, if I come around to being in an action game mood sometime, 6 months from now, like, there's no reason that I wouldn't give it a shot.
Right. That's the one I'm going to pick up. I know that right now is at the top of my action game list. It's the same with like Shovel Knight Dig. I found out yesterday that they're making Shovel Knight Dig, and it's a game that I didn't really like the Shovel Knight game that I played, just the original Shovel Knight. It wasn't what I was in the mood for then. It wasn't what I expected out of the game. And I know it's a wonderful game. I need to go back to it. But the moment that Shovel Knight Dig comes out, I'm going to play it and stick with it, and I'm fairly certain that I'm going to beat it just like I did, SteamWorld Dig 1 and 2. The reason being is that those are genres of games. That's a genre of a game that I don't get to play very often. So I don't get to get in the mood for it. It just happens that they exist, and then I get to experience it. So I know because of that rarity that I'll want to stick with it.
Totally. Well, and there are certain genres that, like, if they're trying something new, then I'm much more interested. And there are other genres where it's like, I want something that's a little bit more, I don't even want to say tried and true, because I never want anything that's just exactly like the things that came before it. But I'm thinking about JRPGs specifically.
Right.
Because JRPGs, if it's not a Final Fantasy game, and if it's not like by a developer that I already know and I already like their games, it takes a lot to convince me to actually beat one of those and like get into it for more than about an hour. Like I'll play an hour of kind of any JRPG and then I'll probably be done. Sometimes it's a struggle to get to the hour mark if it's not one that I trust from a developer that I like.
That's why I really want you to play Dragon Quest XI, is because it's kind of a textbook example of a JRPG, that it does nothing really spectacularly new. It doesn't redefine anything, but what it does is what we said, back 4 years ago, what Overwatch did. It takes what you see in this genre, it polishes it up so much and just gives you the best version of that you can get anywhere. And that's the way I feel about Dragon Quest XI, where you have to be in a headspace to want a traditional JRPG, not something like Final Fantasy 15 was to the series or something like that. But if you're in the mood for a good, like, platonic ideal of a JRPG, that's the one that you should play. So I'm hoping that you give it a real shot instead of bouncing and saying, oh, this is bland, which may seem like it at first, but it is something, it's like that on purpose, like it's doing something. That is the style of the game, Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is Dragon Quest is bland on purpose?
I say, well, not bland. Well,
No, I know what you're
it's
saying. I get it though. Like, and I actually did put Dragon Quest XI back on my list because that demo just came out on Switch. So I'm going to try it probably sometime in the next week or so.
and it's a 10-hour demo, and I've said it before. I think I said it on the last episode. Give it the time that it deserves because it is a slow burn traditional NX RPG.
Yeah, I have trouble with slow burns sometimes. So we'll see. I'll give it, I promise you that I will give it more time than I gave it the first time. That's
Fair
about
enough.
all I can promise, but I will do that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on before we wrap up the topic is like one of the things that I've noticed that can change how much I'm willing to engage with a game or commit to a game or stay with a game long term is the content release schedule, because I'm just a content locust. We've talked about this. I will devour content and move on to the next thing.
Still the best, absolutely the best descriptor review I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
It's apt. It's very apt. So I think one of the interesting things here is that like MMOs and even like Destiny and stuff, their release schedule is like, oh, we're going to put out one expansion pack a year, or, you know, like a new raid every 3 months or 4 months or something. It's just not fast enough for me because they get that content out and then it takes me like no time to just run through the whole thing, like maybe a long weekend. Or if it's an MMO and it's a ton of content, maybe it'll take me a week of like, you know, playing when I have free time to get through all of it, and then I've seen it all. Whereas one of the interesting things I've noticed with Magic the Gathering, or Magic the Gathering Arena specifically, is that they usually put out 3 main sets, 1 core set, and 1 specialty product every year. So that's 5 different excuses to get me to re-engage with their game. And I'm not going to re-engage with every one of those pieces. Like Modern Horizons, I tried a little bit. I did that event in person and then I was done with it, right? It was all of like 1 day. But there's like Commander just came out. Like I'm not going to buy a Commander deck, but I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Let me think about Commander a little bit. Whereas like the core set came out, that didn't work for me super well. But this September set that's going to be out, end of September, beginning of October, that one I'm actually like really excited for because it's the next set that is going to really do new things. And at the same time, it's knocking a bunch of stuff out of rotation from last year or 2 years ago or whatever the rotation cutoff is. And that's going to dramatically change what you see on a day-to-day basis in the game, because a lot of the meta decks that are at the top of like the deck rankings right now just won't work anymore. Like people are going to have to figure out new things. And I want to see new things.
And that's what I think it boils down to is there are 2 things for me that makes me commit to a game. 2 things that make me commit to a game and really either make it evergreen or play it all the way to the end. That at some point it feels new again, that Overwatch, Magic, anything like that the day-to-day gameplay has changed enough that I don't feel burned out. I don't feel like I'm repeating that same thing over and over again, like doing the same dungeon in WoW or Final Fantasy over and over again just for gear. Or it's something that every time I turn it on, like Fire Emblem 3 Houses, that I have a good time with those mechanics. Not just, oh, I'm dealing with this, oh, this is how the game is played, but I want to continue playing with these mechanics longer, that I didn't get my fill of them the first time, where it's, I want to do the social stuff in Persona 5. I want to do the support in Fire Emblem. That I can't get enough of that makes me want to continue forward and then restart with a new game plus. But I won't continue if it's like all of these battles are exactly the same. Okay, the story is interesting, but it's not going anywhere anymore. Like I feel like I've seen and can predict where this is going. I'm not really interested in doing this anymore. It has to be something new or just spectacularly well done mechanically.
Totally. So I don't know if we answered the question at all, but it made for an interesting discussion, which is what I was going for. So I think
it's true.
I think we'll call that a success. Before we dive into Weekly Geekery, what do we have for the Geeky Offer of the Week?
This week, just remember that we have a Patreon, you guys. We have lots of different things on there that you can do, such as getting Discord roles, that kind of stuff. I've posted a post, actually, on there asking what you would like for any kind of exclusive content that we do. So if you think about it, go to patreon.com/geek2geekcast and let us know what you would like. That will never impact the main podcast here. That is solely something entirely different. So just if you have any ideas, let us know.
Yeah, and so we haven't locked in our first one of those yet. But essentially what we're thinking is there are a ton of topics we've thrown out between the two of us, not like on air before. This is the first time we're really talking about it, where it would be interesting, or it would be almost like we've talked about, okay, if we made a spin-off podcast, what would it be, right? And there's all these topics that we love, but we also realize that like we don't have the time to commit to doing it every week. And also, I don't know if we have the content to do it every week either. Like,
right.
If we were to spin something off, the easiest thing, honestly, would be a Star Wars podcast. Like, you and I both know it. We both love it. There's tons of lore to dig into there. We could, but I would never want to feel like I'm forcing it. And I know that that would end up happening. So I think what we might do is that we've identified a ton of topics over time, or a ton of like almost mini podcast series ideas over time that we would love to do, but they don't quite fit in the main feed here, right? Like, we can't do a book club in our main feed because it just doesn't work with the format that we have. Like, most of you out there aren't going to read a book if we tell you to. But if we're like, hey, we're going to do a book club for one book, and we're going to do a series of X number of podcasts in the Patreon feed, it won't interfere with the main feed, but we can still try things out. So that's the kind of thing that we're thinking about for Patreon, just to give you guys an idea.
And so any ideas that you have, we want your feedback on this. We want to know what you would like about that. So, email us at geek2geekcast@gmail.com. You can tweet us at geek2geekcast. You can use the contact form at geek2geekmedia.com/contact. Post a comment on the Patreon post like that. Whatever it is, send us a message on Patreon, whatever. We want to know what you would like that, because we make this stuff for you guys. I mean, as much as we love doing this, we couldn't continue this without y'all. And we really want to know if that's something that you would be interested in, because we're pretty sure there's something out there we can do for you. We just want to know what kind. What kind of stuff you like?
Gotta be something. Yeah. Around the network this week, I don't know, because for the next few weeks here, there's a lot of like scheduling things. So we're kind of recording out of sync with real time. But I will say, on the network, we have Geekitude with Ray and Joe. Always interesting, often an interview podcast. Not always, but it's always an interesting one, whether or not they have an interview. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea is great, just like regardless of what they're talking about. And Sometimes Rob is a show that happens sometimes with Rob, believe it or not. And Troidal is streaming on Thursday mornings. Capsule J streaming Tuesdays from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, sometimes Thursdays and weekends. And then we also have the Geekery, where you can read about a bunch of stuff going on with like Austin's Dragon Quest or the 13th Story. We're looking at maybe adding some more people there too. And you guys can subscribe to that at geek2geekmedia.com/subscribe. So lots of places around the network that you can get content. I just don't know what the particular content is this week. I'll fill that in next time we talk.
Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff.
Exactly. So with that being said, it's time for our weekly geekery, where we share what we've been geeking out about this week. What do you have this week? Even though it hasn't been a full week, hasn't been close to a full week.
I think it's been 2 days. It might have even been a day. I can't remember. But either way, I did actually start playing Collection of Mana. I forgot that I ordered it. I had apparently pre-ordered it on Amazon when they had a discount, didn't remember it, and so it came in the mail yesterday, maybe, and I started playing it this morning while my power was out, because the Switch is on battery, and I started playing Final Fantasy Adventure. That is the first Mana game, like they called it Adventures of Mana when they did a remake of it, and then I found out that there is also a second remake, a first remake of it called Sword of Mana that was on the Game Boy Advance. That was a remake of Seiken Densetsu, and I can't remember the subtitles, but you get to choose what the screen looks like, because this is the Game Boy version of this. The Game Boy original version of this from, I think, 1991. And they didn't even change the name of it to Adventures of Mana or anything like that. It still says Final Fantasy Adventure on there. And you get to change the screen to look like what you want. So you get either a black and white Game Boy, you get kind of a Game Boy Color enhancement with a little bit of red and black shading on it, or you get the four tones of green that you actually see the individual pixels on the screen like you did in the original Game Boy, and I have to play it. That is the only way that I can play this game, and I realized that the reason being is that it emulates exactly what my Game Boy looked like when I was a kid playing this game. Like, I could probably do it on any other game without worrying about it at all. But because I have so much time sunk into Final Fantasy Adventure when I was a kid, playing it on the green original brick Game Boy, I cannot play it with any other version, like with these graphics and everything. And as soon as I clicked it into the green, it was like, oh, this is so much fun. This is great. And I have totally enjoyed it. Like, it is not a great game. There are so many things that they've done better in the remakes of it. And I don't understand why they didn't put in, Sword of Mana instead of this original Game Boy one, because it was a remake that did so many things better. But I'm so glad this is in there because I'm just having a good time playing one that looks exactly like I played when I was a kid. It makes me so happy.
That's super cool. I always love when you get a chance to just like grab onto nostalgia and embrace it. Doesn't happen all that often, but when you can and you can just ride that wave, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the mechanics are bad, that it's not good. You have to equip a single healing item or spell to use like one time. You can barely hit things. You hit something and it moves underneath you and then it hits you when you thought you would hit it with your sword. The story and writing is, 1991 Game Boy story, but there's something about it that is really keeping me playing it. And I got to look up and see on how long this version of it lasts, like the original Game Boy version, because if it's a shorter game, I can see myself sticking with this one because of nostalgia, because of getting further than I did when I was a kid, and really being like, I'm an adult now, but this still has that kind of childlike wonder that it had when I was a kid, not knowing anything about that it was a mana game. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm willing to commit if it's not too long, because this one would get very old if it were too long, because it's very much a product of 20 years ago.
Oh, I completely believe that. Very much. Well, I'm glad that you found something that you like that's nostalgic. Speaking of nostalgia, I have something that I have no nostalgia for, but you do. She-Ra.
Right.
So
yeah,
you and I talked about this the other day. I finally gave it a shot. It was on my list. I think I added it when you talked about it, actually, and I finally got around to it. It's one that, and so one of the things that probably like at the beginning of this season, maybe like partway through last season, I decided that I wasn't going to like put everything that I'm doing every week into geekery anymore. I was just going to try to highlight things that either I had something interesting to say about or something that I really liked. So there's a lot that I don't put in now that, like, if I just didn't like it, I'm like, it's okay. People don't need to hear about it. That's fine. She-Ra is one where I wanted to bring it up because, like, I didn't love it, but I could tell I'm not the target audience. And for the right kind of person, it would be such a good show. And I think that if I sat down and like watched this with my kids, it might be really good too. I could see it being a great show for like adults watching with their kids of certain ages. So I asked, it's so funny. I asked my daughter if she was going to try it, or if she had tried it, or if she had heard of it. And she goes, oh yeah, that's on my list to watch later. So she's like me. I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised, right? That she has a list. Like, she's 9. So, she has her own list. She has her own system. She has her way that she approaches media. It's so fascinating that she's kind of falling into some of the same ways that I do it. So that's very cool. But anyway, She-Ra, I think, would be a good show to watch with kids. Or if you have nostalgia for She-Ra, I could definitely see getting into that. Like, if I had any kind of nostalgia for it, it probably would have hooked me.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Like, it is a very good TV show. It's just, it plays off of my generation's nostalgia of growing up with He-Man and She-Ra. And then it's also very much a kid show, a kid-friendly show at the very least, where watching it with someone like that would be really entertaining, and seeing how they react to it. My 9-year-old nephew loves it. That I don't know how much he has kept up with to look at the new seasons, but he loves it. That he really, really loves this one. So I think that your daughter will like it too. Your son probably will as well. He's within that age demographic.
Probably. So yeah, I will ask them when they try it out and see what they think. The other thing that I did within the last couple of days here is I finally rewatched Endgame for the second time. I had only ever seen it the one time when it came out.
Okay.
So it's still really good. I mean, it doesn't surprise anyone. I don't know if I have any new thoughts about it. It's still really good. Maybe my only thought is that, like, there are long stretches where there's not action, which is not a bad thing, except that when you're tired at night and you're on your couch and you might accidentally fall asleep. I didn't actually fall asleep, but it was close. I had to split up viewing this movie between 2 different nights, which I don't normally do. So That was it. It's a long movie, but people know that already. It's so good, especially near the end. Some of those fight scenes at the end, it's just, I'm constantly amazed by what they were able to accomplish, right? I don't think it's the greatest movie ever, but I do think it is probably the greatest cinematic achievement that has ever happened.
Yeah, that's the MCU as a whole, really. I think that none of them are like these masterpieces of cinema that are going to last hundreds of years and people go back and watch Endgame. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think that the impact that this entire series and saga has, the story that it's told, the outside the movies, being able to tell a story like this across cinema, I think it's changed the entire medium and, well, the business of the medium, I guess.
Yeah. It totally has. It's had this gigantic impact. And just the fact that they were able to execute it and bring together this entire Infinity Saga of like 21 movies or however many it is. And there's actually like beginning, middle, end. There's a conclusion. There's a stopping point. They brought it all together. Yep. They tied it all together. It's incredible. And I don't know, it was just cool to watch it again. So I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to end of the year stuff, because there's no way that doesn't make some of our lists at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. That's probably it for this week. You guys can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
You can also have great discussions on Slack and Discord. You can go to geek2geekmedia.com and find the invite links, and you can hang out with us on there. And while you're there, you can check out all the other content on the network.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's. And you can listen to me talk even more on the Dragon Quest FM podcast.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, geeks. I still love you. I do.
Hey geeks, this is Capsule J. I'm a streamer on the Geek to Geek Media Network. If you like discovering new games and chatting with cool nerdy folks, be sure to check out my channel on Twitch. You can find it at twitch.tv/CapsuleJ. That's CapsuleJay. I stream a blend of indies, retro games, and RPGs most Tuesday nights from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern, and occasionally on Thursdays and weekends. Hope to see you then.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.
Hello friends, this is Troidal Power inviting you to join me over on Twitch most weeknights, sometime after dinner. Video games have always been a social hobby for me, with friends and family crammed together on a couch, chatting away while someone holds the controller. And thanks to the power of the internet, I've got my own virtual couch over on Twitch, where you can kick back and goof off while I play games. Find me on Twitch by searching Troidal Power, that's TROYTLE Power, to snag a spot on the couch.
Hello, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea.
And together we are Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea, a podcast all about pop culture.
We talk about books, movies, music, basically anything we want at this point. Yes, we obsess about K-pop.
And Keanu Reeves.
And sometimes Katie cries on the podcast.
Hey, that's rude.
But really, we're just here to talk about all the things that we love, so make sure to head over to teatimewithkc.com and geek2geekmedia.com to check us out. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our show wherever you download your podcasts.
Bye!